good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Larry Stutzring, Major General, U.S. Air Force, retired, Director of Research here at the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. And welcome to our Spacepower Forum. We're very pleased and privileged today that we have Major General Leah Lauderback. She's the Director of Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance at Headquarters U.S. Space Force. And in this capacity, she serves as the Senior Intelligence Director, an advisor to the Chief of Space Operations. She's responsible for policy formulation, planning, evaluation, oversight, and leadership of Space Force ISR. Prior to her current role, General Lauderback was Director of Intelligence for U.S. Space Command. So welcome, General Lauderback. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you. How about you, Stutz?
I'm doing great, and thanks for making time today. I know it's busy. It's a busy time for Space Force. I'd like to start off by giving you an opportunity to make a few opening comments and talk about the critical challenges your team is facing. And before you do that, as a note to our audience, feel free to raise your hand using the function on the app or submit a question in the Q&A window, and we'll get to those in the second half of our session. So now over to you, General.
Okay, well, great. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to be here. I really enjoy getting the message out about Space Force because it's very exciting. As you mentioned, it's also a little challenging. There is a lot of work that we have that we've accomplished already, but a lot of work that we've got to do here in the future. But I'm extremely, really privileged to be part of it. So what I wanted to talk about here in just the opening comments was that this is my second time now in a row of assignments to stand up an organization. So U.S. Space Command, I was the J2 in 2019, and we stood up that organization August of 2019. And so, and then, General Raymond asked me to come out here to help stand up the Space Force, which of course I'm privileged to do, but it is just, it's another organization that you're standing up. And so with all of those challenges, so just from a real quick standpoint of, we're in our 15th month now as stand up in the Space Force. And if I was to tell anybody, here are some lessons learned about standing up organizations, just real quickly. Once of course you get the vision and the direction from the commander, or in this case, the CSO, then you can start moving out, but you really need manpower. And you need manpower that has desks and IT at the appropriate security classifications. Of course, that's very important to us in the intelligence business. And so we're still gaining our manpower here. We've got some facilities. We're getting through those challenges. Secondly, would be you really have to create some processes to move towards normalization. Your workforce will get very tired if it's so chaotic and reactive all of the time. So you want to move towards that normalization. You truly have to prioritize, ruthlessly prioritize is what I call it. We have a very small staff here as we're growing, still here in the beginning. And so there are just so many taskers that come down from, the joint staff or from, maybe within the intelligence community type of thing. And we just can't get to them all. And that's okay. That's okay. I think everybody knows where we are in the movie. I tell everybody that everybody's got to get their hands dirty, and everybody is an action officer. So myself included. And I love surprising people when I direct call them because, I don't need the exec to do it for me. I'm going to do it myself and get my hands dirty. But it's absolutely appropriate anytime that you're starting these organizations. So with that, we're in our first 15th month in the Space Force, and I think we've been really pretty successful. General Raymond, I think he's very proud of what the team is doing, and I also am very proud of what we've accomplished from an intelligence perspective. So I just wanted to go over a few of those things. I had 6 priorities. I still have the same 6 priorities that I had published back in October timeframe to the ISR enterprise. And when I'm addressing the ISR enterprise, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance enterprise, I'm addressing those that are in the Space Force. I'm not necessarily addressing those folks that are external, those that might be part of the intelligence community or part of another service, that type of thing. I'm not addressing necessarily the NIM, the National Intelligence Manager for Space at the DNI level, right? So I'm very much focused on building the Space Force intelligence or ISR enterprise. I'd say our biggest quick win was that we did become a member of the intelligence community in January of this year, and I'm happy to talk more about that later on. But I do consider that a big win for us. We have stood up this directorate. We are small, but we are powerful, I will say. And so we are normalizing all the functions that we need to execute here on the staff. We are in the throes really of standing up the National Space Intelligence Center. I'm excited about this one. We have a working group that's been meeting for a number of weeks now, internal to the Space Force, external as well, to figure out what do we want the National Space Intelligence Center to look like in the future. But I am marching towards the goal of January of 2022, actually being able to stand up at an initial operating capacity of the National Space Intelligence Center. We're also trying to change the culture within the Space Force, and that would be from a space operator standpoint, a cyber operator, as well as an ISR operator. And I'm really proud of the team down at a tactical level. I mean, anybody that's been associated as an intelligence professional who's been associated with Air Force Space Command in the past, I think that they would be extremely proud to see what it is that our ISR guardians and airmen, right? We still have airmen. I'm still one of them. Working in the Space Force, that what they're doing at a tactical level to inform, educate, and really synchronize operations that are happening at the tactical level, sitting side by side with their space operator counterparts. I think it's awesome, and we've got a ways to go, but we're really starting off on the right foot, and that's all thanks to our Delta 7 commander down at the tactical level. We are building out new squadrons. I will say that we're not, we're just getting those billets in FY22. So we've got paperwork that we've started and whatnot. So this is one that we'll in building the 4 new squadrons, and happy to talk about those specifics a bit later. But we will, we will stand those up over the 22, 23, 24 years. And then lastly is creating a capacity and a capability from an ISR perspective to really get at enhancing our capability to characterize the adversary. So I haven't started much on this. We have talked about it. We're trying to educate folks on what does ISR mean and why it is that we might need those capabilities. But I've got to get some more manpower on the staff first, and then we will start to tackle that here in the end of this year. Anyhow, so those were my 6 priorities that I had started out with, and then we have made some accomplishments in each one of those. But I think I'll stop there, and then just happy to answer questions and get a discussion going. So thank you.
You bet. Well, that was a great beginning. I've got some questions, and I first want to, please pass on our thanks to your team. They've been wonderfully helpful as they do this very important build up and move out that according to your priorities. I do have a question, a baseline to set. We now have, and especially for our audience to understand this separation of the Air Force A2 and Space Force A2. And as you stand up that directorate, how does it compare to your time in the A2 at Headquarters Air Force now? And how are these organizations going to be similar or different? How are they working together, and how are they synchronizing and deconflicting their responsibilities? How are these different now, General?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So General O'Brien, as the A26, she and I meet regularly. I meet with her and her leadership team on a regular basis to make sure that we're synchronized and we're getting after our challenges. I mean, General O'Brien said probably about a year ago, before the Space Force had even stood up, she absolutely wants the intelligence professionals within the Space Force to be successful. So I'm very thankful for her team for helping us make us successful. The truth is that we have similar functions, but we will be different in scope and size. I will say that. So if you can just imagine, really any of the other intelligence directorates that are at this level for the services are much, much larger and than what we will ever be.
Yes.
Yes. And so that really helps me to prioritize what it is that we will be able to do on our staff. But functions such as, because because we've become a member of the intelligence community, you have to be in compliance with certain intelligence community directives. So there are functions within that we have to, right? Authorities as being the senior intelligence officer come with compliance issues that we have to maintain. I, like General O'Brien, will be the functional manager. I am the functional manager for the intelligence professionals within the Space Force. So that's for the officers and enlisted and on the civilian side. So similar to A26, we have a career functional manager, and we've got folks in each one of those categories to professionally develop our talent management framework, those types of things, to ensure that we're putting the right guardians in the right positions and caring for those folks. I mean, of course, we're spending money. We're spending national intel dollars, national intelligence program dollars. We're spending Space Force dollars. So those types of things we have to be, we're building the budgets. We're building we're planning for the future. So those functions all are really very similar. Where there are some things that we will absolutely have to rely on the A26. And because we didn't bring over in the Space Force, we didn't bring over a lot of we didn't bring over any administrative folks, right? So the Air Force is still helping us with that. Security from that standpoint, we have I will have a very small staff, but I will need to rely on General O'Brien and her staff for things of that nature. So we are in the midst right now of developing those MOAs, those memorandums of agreement, so that we can both be successful and in moving towards more mature staff that we'll have in the future. But I think that's I mean, those are the big items that we're working. There are just some things that here's another example of something that will be very different. We are not going to have human intelligence professionals within the Space Force. We didn't bring that skill set over, and so we will rely on General O'Brien and the Air Force to answer requirements. I mean, we still have human intelligence requirements. Same thing on the counterintelligence side of the house. We still have those types of requirements, but we did not bring those folks over from the Air Force side. Yeah. So those are a few things that are new and different.
A few challenges there.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Well, let me ask a follow-up on that, related to this is, how do you see you changing the capabilities of the Space Force E2? I would have to assume that the current E2 in the Air Force is built around the air domain. And of course, Space Force is about the space domain. Do you see structural, or for example, information systems that support the distribution of intelligence information? Do you see things developing in terms of separate programs that better support Space Force?
So from an intelligence perspective, I mean, there are, I would have to say that there are at a tactical level things that we already have from a Space Force perspective that are capabilities, systems to answer that specific mission, right? But in the big program and big dollars that we're putting towards, that the Air Force is putting towards what's called ABMS, Air Battle, or All Domain Battle Management System. That is something absolutely that the Space Force is part of. And from an intelligence perspective, that's where we want to be able to put most of, if not all of the data that we are collecting, whether it's from air breathers on the A26 side, or if that's from space capabilities that we have on the S2 side. So there are, yes, there are systems that we are developing together for sure. And then I would guess that in the future, we will probably develop others. I don't have anything off the top of my head from a systems perspective. I think, the biggest issue here is that we just need to make sure the data, the standards for the data, right, are similar, and we're all able to get to the data. There's something like, as an example, or a definitive point I did want to make on, so I am the S2, right? And so General O'Brien is the A26. I am not the S26. That's a big difference, a big change that we made in the Space Force, that the Air Force is getting after information warfare. On the Space Force side of the house, I think that might be something that we mature to in the future.
Yes.
Not to say that it would be S26 necessarily, but But what we did do in the Space Force is under that chief operating officer. So that's a Lieutenant General Saltzman, and I think you all interviewed him a little while
Yes.
back. So under the COO, that's where we have all of our operators. So the ISR operators, the space operators, as well as the cyber operators. And we did that so that we could try to integrate as much as possible those functions. So we'll see if we're successful here in the future.
Yes. Yes, very interesting. I'll move a little bit here off vector and ask you about characterizing threats in space. And you've said previously that we don't necessarily have an adequate capability to do this that is at the level of speed and confidence that we need. So what capabilities or added capacity are needed to address this shortfall?
Yes, so I would tell you, so, and again, this came from my U.S. Space Command time. If anybody read my bio, you'd see that I didn't have a lot of space, a lot of experience in the space domain until I commanded at NASIC, National Air and Space Intelligence Center. So got a little bit of taste there, but really is the U.S. Space Command J2, Director of Intelligence. It cemented in my brain the understanding of how difficult it is to characterize adversary threats on orbit. Now we have a lot, obviously there are adversary threats that are terrestrial, and but right, we've got lots of systems that are looking down from NGA or NSA or whatever other combat support agencies. And so I think, not that we have it covered by any means looking down, but we're a lot better off. On looking up, the issue is exactly what you stated. The confidence that you don't have. It didn't seem to me that we had a lot of confidence in the calls that we were making. We want to be more confident to give the commander the best information for him to make decisions, for him or her to make decisions with. And then also the speed at which to do that. So it happened. Things are happening fast up on orbit, as you know, and it's you could. I mean, you're talking minutes when an adversary could actually engage you, and you might never know it, right? And so what you need to be able to do is as an intelligence professional, of course, I want to be able to advise. I have to sense the information. I want to be able to identify what it is. I want to be able to attribute it to whomever is the adversary that's taken that shot, as an example. And then I've got to be able to share that information. So you asked about, you're asking about specifics. What kinds of things would we need? And I can tell you, I can't answer that right now. And because this is one of those areas where we are on the staff, is that and I want to get after this priority, but we're just not there yet from a manpower or an expertise standpoint.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that is happening in the domain in this regard of we all think, I think we all understand that we need some more intelligence, and we want to be able to have persistence and confidence. But and when I say that, I think it's from an NRO perspective. It's from anybody that's got a capability on orbit is looking for how do we do this? How do we characterize the adversary better? So it's not just from a Space Force perspective. The Army as well, right, has some capabilities. And the commercial sector for sure. And so so what we need to do is we need to essentially have a design group that gets together and determines what do we have, what do we think that we need, and then let's get after it together, because we know we can't do this all on our own. And so what I would say, the way I think we'll go about doing this is we are going to stand up a Space Warfighting Analysis Center within the Space Force, and it will be run by an SES, and that is separate from my organization. But that organization, otherwise known as the SWAC, Space Warfighting Analysis Center, they're going to get after force design, and so they will get after not only of what comms capabilities we need, but after what ISR capabilities we need as well. So ask me again in like a year, maybe, and
yes.
I think I'll be able to give you some more definitive answers to what it is that we think we need.
That's fantastic. So you brought up a little bit about the space intelligence organizations. They're littered across the U.S. military space enterprise. I wonder if you have concerns from the intelligence side that, precious resources, especially in the future environment we've got on the budget, could they be diluted across all these different and at times overlapping entities? And what might you suggest be done to consolidate and streamline those organizations within Space Force?
Mhm. Thank you. So I would say that there's probably not as much overlap as folks might think. When you have all of these organizations that have an intelligence function and looking in the space domain, they're primarily, I mean, they've got a role and a function to perform. So, our folks that are down at the tactical level, they're doing tactical intel collection, planning, collection, exploitation, getting that information to the space operators. At an operational level, we do play in that from a Space Force perspective, some of our units, but primarily the U.S. Space Command JIOC, the Joint Intelligence Operations Center, as any other combatant command has a JIOC, that is the operational level, and we present forces to the operational level, we present forces to the combatant command. And so between that operational level of intelligence that's being provided, we also have our own operational level, and that would be considered like an AOC, the Air Operations Center. And so for the AOC for Space Force is the Space Force Operations Center out at Vandenberg. And so at an operational level, they're doing, and they are talking to one another because we are presenting those forces to the combatant command. And so what we need to make sure is that we continue that deconfliction of roles and functions. We need to make sure that we're not duplicating. And that's the great thing about, I think all of the senior leaders that we that are in this business completely understand that. We do not have enough people and enough expertise to have duplication, right? Just not possible. Yeah. But other things where, like, I think that people believe that, hey, NSA has some space function, NGA has some role in intelligence within the space function, or DNI, or perhaps some of the intelligence production centers like NASIC, what we want to stand up as NSIC, the National Space Intelligence Center, or even MISIC, the Missile Space Intelligence Center. So those, they're really not overlapping today. How we devise and ensure that we're not stepping on each other's toes, but we're getting all of the information together that we need. We do this through committees already today, and so and those committees are led by senior intelligence analysts that that have been in the business for a long time. So there's really not as much overlap. I don't think that, even though you hear, right, there's an intelligence function here in this space organization, this organization, this organization. But there's truly not a lot of overlap or duplication that's happening. I think in the future, though, as we do grow, because we will grow in the Space Force intelligence enterprise, we absolutely have to make sure that we're maintaining that communication with, if it is with the combatant command, or if it's really communication with others in the intelligence community, that we maintain that communication and deliberately defining who is doing what, so that we don't duplicate. And so I'm not really worried about it. I'm really excited about it, because there is so much that is happening from an adversary perspective, and the growth that is going to happen in the next 10 years, that there's going to be plenty of work, and I don't think that we're going to be stepping on each other's toes.
That's very interesting, and it, you get to the point where manpower is very important, and I'm curious that how, General Raymond's talked a lot about, this plan for moving billets over, and I don't think that's completed yet. Where is that? And what about making that case for additional manpower from what we think it's going to be in 2021? Yes.
So what I would tell you, and if you had been in the space community as an intelligence professional, again, 10 years ago, even really like 6 years ago, you'd say that we don't have enough billets and we definitely don't have enough people, right? The fill rates were not where they needed to be, but also that we would have, just 2-3 people down at an OSS, at an operational support squadron, helping those space operators. And that's not, if you were to say the equivalent of what you had at a space wing compared to what you had at an air wing, and Stutz, I know like you flew the A-10, right? You probably had 15 or 20 intelligence people dedicated to you at that at those units.
Yes.
And
yes.
so on the Space Force side, we have increased those numbers over the last 5 years, and to a much more respectable number, I will say. And so essentially what happened when we brought over into the from the Air Force to the Space Force just last year, we brought over just over 800 intelligence billets. And then of those 800 intelligence billets, we don't have them all completely filled, but I can say that we brought over, around a little over 600 airmen that became guardians. And then on top of that, we were awarded, I will say, but we have another about 400 billets that are coming in 22, 23, and 24. And those billets were approved through the Department of Defense, so we know that we're getting those billets. And those are the ones that will help us to fill out those new squadrons that we need to develop, and then also to robust some of those other capabilities, other squadrons and units that we had failed to, a number of years ago. The challenge, honestly, is going to be getting people into those billets. And so what you had alluded to earlier is that
Yes.
that General Raymond has been talking about, and we are working with the other services right now to ask for more folks coming over from the other services. And so actually we just completed there was a window open for Army and Navy to put in packages for volunteer to come over to become a Space Force Guardian. And so that just closed, I think, 2 days ago on the 31st of March. And then we'll have a board, and we will have notifications that should come out probably July timeframe. That's what our human resources folks are thinking. And so then we'll get another. Now this number is not going to be large this year, but we'll say that this is our first increments, and we would like that number to grow. But I think General Raymond had mentioned that there might be about 30 folks that will come over from the other services. And that's across the board. That's across space, cyber, intel career fields, acquisition, engineering. So we definitely need to keep our foot on the gas pedal so that we can, you can't just, fill 400 billets and wait for a sessions coming from, the BMT or ROTC or the academy, that type of thing. So we're looking at different ways. I would love to bring in industry. I would love to put a uniform on somebody who wants to come in for a few years, and or maybe just ask them to come over as a civilian, but to fill some of these billets. We aren't there yet, but that is definitely a conversation that we're having with folks to fill some of those billets as well. But I'm hopeful that the inter-service transfers is what they're called. That this number this year, a small number, but next year, hopeful that we'll be able to get hundreds of folks to come over, because there's a lot of excitement. I'll tell you what, I fielded a number of phone calls from former Army folks, soldiers that I had worked with downrange, that were excited about coming in and being part of the Space Force. So I think we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah. Well, Leah, I am available to fill any slot anytime. It does sound exciting, and as the nation's newest armed service, Space Force has an opportunity to really not be the same, but do things differently, and looking forward to how that that develops. It sounds like you don't want me, so I'll move on here. So let's talk about, so in the recruiting, you do have to assess people from the lowest ranks of officer and enlisted. And do you have a strategy on what you're looking for? And is there going to be a big influx at the start, or will it be just pick up from where the Department of the Air Force is doing that?
Right. So I would say more it's the kind of the standard session numbers that we have grown up with as part of the Air Force. We are still using the Air Force's basic military training as an example, and so I couldn't tell you if HR has managed to increase those numbers, but if we have, I don't think that it's been by very many. On the ROTC or on the officer training side of the house, standard numbers that will be coming over. Though I would say, I think 2 years ago was the first year that we had folks come over from the academy. We had 16 at that point. And then the following year, I believe the number grew to over 80, and so so that number is increasing. And I think at some point here we will, not, I mean, just even out, right? I don't want to say plateau,
Right.
but we are getting the right accession numbers that we need. So as far as those numbers that come in, then of course the issue is the expertise and the training, and what is it that how do we get them to go into the job skilled and ready to go. So from an Air Force or from a intelligence perspective, we will continue to use our intelligence training that's down at Goodfellow Air Force Base. All of the services use Goodfellow Air Force Base for initial training. And then we're talking about, as opposed to, so an officer might go there for 4 or 5 or 6 months. And then, so they're an intelligence professional at the basic level, right? Now we need to, and they get a little bit, a smattering of understanding what's in the space domain. But we need to get them much more, a much better understanding, enhanced understanding of orbitology and astrodynamics and things that you don't necessarily get at an Intel fundamentals training, which is absolutely appropriate. So we're talking about, and I'm just really excited about this, being able to train all of our operators together. So the space operators, our Intel folks, as well as the cyber operators. Again, not there yet, but we do have a field command that we're standing up. That's the STARCOM, or the Space Training and Readiness Command. And once that is stood up, they will be the ones to tackle how do we do training together. And this is unlike, I mean, you as an A-10 driver and other aircraft before, you never trained with the Intel people together, right? Not until maybe much later in your career did you have those experiences together, right? But so I'm excited that we could actually train together. And the idea at some point might be that we bring in a brand new ISR airman or officer. They go through this training. They work at a tactical level with their space operators. They do that for 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years. And then if they say, hey, I'd like to really become a space operator, I'd like to try that, right? Or vice versa, if the space operator wants to come into intelligence for 4 or 5 or 6 more years, that type of thing. I think what we have the opportunity here to build these uber operators at the 15, 20-year standpoint that understand at least of those operational fields that we talk about, ISR, cyber, and space. It'd be great if you can get 2 of the 3 of those and be much more of an expert as an operator in the domain, right, in the entire domains. I'm just really excited about the prospect of that.
No, that's fantastic. That sounds really good. And then maintain weapons school presence also, I would imagine.
Oh, yes, sir, absolutely, yes. So, so we send folks through Intel, our weapons school right now, both Intel, or both, all 3, I should say, Intel, cyber, and space. I think we're just looking at what is, and what, I don't think we're close to looking at and making changes at this point, but where do we want to be in the future? So those Intel folks, right? I was a patch. I am a patch, I should say. I went through the school. I was an instructor at the school, and we're always tweaking. The weapons school is always tweaking the syllabus, and so I think at some point we will, we will change what are our requirements for an Intel weapons officer, space weapons officer, though. But if we could have those 3 still training together at weapons school,
wouldn't that be great?
It'll be great.
That's fantastic. Right. Let's press. Let me pivot a bit here, and may I ask you a question on the National Space Intelligence Center? Mm-hmm. You've dedicated a couple space squadrons transferred over from NASIC. Now they're going to be, these 2 organizations are going to be co-located. Mm-hmm. How are they going to be differentiated? Can you talk about that a little bit? And, we've had some people mention that there's unnecessarily duplication there. How would you address that?
Okay, well, yeah. So I don't see that there's duplication really by any means. If NASIC is still considered NASIC, and if they keep the S, and that's up to General O'Brien and what it is that she wants to do, because there is still some support that the Air Force is needing from a space perspective. but once those two squadrons come over to stand up the National Space Intelligence Center, I mean, they're the only folks that are going to be doing space analysis and counter space analysis. And like so there, that entity, there won't be any duplication that's happening over at NASIC from that analytic perspective. I think there are folks that think that, well, folks, there are this entity down at MISIC, I mean, that do space. There's some folks at NGIC, the National Ground Intelligence Center, right? That is the Army's service center. So, but that also does a space mission. These are conversations that we're going to have in the, later time. We don't have to have those conversations right now. But that how do we ensure that those missions that they are doing is under or part of the National Space Intelligence Center and under those authorities, as so today, and maybe we keep it this way, that today it works, and it's just a matter of these folks are again through committees and conversations at the senior intelligence level. That those missions get done today. Maybe we keep it that way, or maybe in the future we decide that we want a closer linkage. But we all have to have those conversations together. I by no means am like dictating, hey, this is the way that we're going to go by any means. What I can tell you though is that those two squadrons that we have that will be the core of NSIC, that's not just the only thing that we need. We need to increase. We need if it's to increase the number of analysts that we have there, because the numbers of adversary systems is only increasing. And so if you understand scientific and technical intelligence, I mean, and you want an analyst that is an expert in that weapon system. And so as those number of weapon systems that our adversaries grow, we probably need to grow in numbers of analysts. And those analysts are engineers, they're, maybe they're chemists, they're, they're scientists, as well as a traditional intelligence analyst. So I see that as there's probably growth in the future. And I also see that from an exploitation standpoint, or from an advanced threat analysis standpoint, we have room to grow too. And so, as I stated, we've got this working group that is comprised today of Space Force folks, of the A26 staff, of the folks that are at NASIC right now. DIA is part of that. USDINS is part of that. And so we're all getting together and talking about, what do we want NSIC to look like in the beginning, which I think is pretty easy in the beginning, and but much more difficult where we want it to look like as a fully operational, capable center.
Well, I'm certainly seeing that you need that capacity. Space Force now enabling all other service domains and capabilities. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. And now you pick up, as an independent armed service, the responsibility for conducting unique, distinct sole effects strategically in and from and through space. So I'd like to back up on the IC piece when I talk about that, because I'm curious, and you talked about this a bit, but formally joining the IC as the most junior member since 2006 or so, and there's 18 of them, and Space Force's mission is freaking important. And do you feel you're going to be able to immediately establish yourself as one of the more dominant participants in that community?
I would say well, I don't know that I want to be dominant, but I do want to be on par with the other services and with the other agencies. And I absolutely feel that way today. So direct when we went through the process, and this wasn't something that the IC does on a regular basis, as you stated. It's been a while, and so we kind of we came together. Our staffs came together with my staff came together with the DNI staff, and we went through, okay, pros and cons, and what do we think this means? I mean, what functions do we need to be able to execute in order to become a member of the IC? And so we had that in place, and then the Director Ratcliffe made the decision for us to become a member. I'm very thankful for that. And then after Director Ratcliffe actually provided me with a memo that says, hey, here are the things that I need to make sure that you are doing. And if you aren't doing those things today, what is your plan to be able to get to those things? And so over the last couple of months, we have been going through this list, and it's extensive because there are a lot of intelligence community directives out there, things that you just need to be in compliance with. And if you can think about it, right, we're spending their money to do the mission, to do a national mission. So they want to make sure that we're spending their money correctly. There's tradecraft that we need to be able to follow as intelligence professionals. And so, we'll be compliant there. Intelligence oversight types of things where we want to ensure that we're not that we're in compliance and not spying on folks that we shouldn't be looking at. These types of things are all stated in the compliance directives. And so we can say today that we're compliant with all of these. And the reason is because we've been under the Air Force. We've been, and the Air Force has been compliant doing these things. So now it's just a matter of, okay, we're still going to use the Air Force for these things. And then for these other items, we think that we have the functions already stood up. So from a resource perspective, as an example, I feel like I have enough of a function here that I can say to Director Haynes now that we are good to go. And then as well, and when I say we talk about being on par with the other services, Director Ratcliffe Director Haynes asks for weekly reports. I provide weekly reports to Director Haynes directly, right? Other things that she hosts are executive committees, deputy executive committees, and we're members of all of those and all of the working groups that we can attend right now. And so, and I have a really pretty close relationship with the new NIM for space, and so that being on the DNI staff, that is I think it's only goodness as our organizations come closer together. I mean, I don't think that folks should think that the Space Force is the only entity that should own space, right? I mean, we are the military aspect of this, and we need to prepare for warfighting in space, deterrence or warfighting in space. And so, so we're not the end all be all, but we need to be much, we have a large part to play in that overall much larger enterprise that is offering all of these capabilities to the world, or certainly to the American public.
Well
So
said.
I hope that answers your question about
It does.
Yeah, becoming a member of the IC.
You bet. One last question. We're getting close to the end of our time here. Just talk a little bit about the importance that you see in changes in working with partners and allies. There's some issues there and how well space can be collaborated with. And so what have you put into place recently, and how are you trying to get over those hurdles, and talk to that classified nature of that business?
Sure. So I think that this needs to be looked at in two ways, or two prongs. First is from an operational standpoint, the relationship that we have with especially our Five Eye partners in this domain, is very strong. You've seen lately in the news where the UK, they're going to come out with a space command. The French, the Japanese have already have a unit. I can't remember what they're calling it, but nonetheless, all of our partners in that sense are, they understand the importance of the domain. And so from an operational standpoint, we've had a great relationship with these countries to bring them together to, if it's L&Os, liaison officers, or if it's planning together, if it's, somebody, operators being in operation centers together, right? So when we talk about those partnerships, they're very strong. I'm sure that we can improve, no doubt, from an operational standpoint. However, the second item, or the second prong of this, is the intelligence sharing. So because there are classification issues on both sides. Classification issues that from an operations standpoint, that programs are just highly classified, and so it's difficult to share those capabilities, plan together. And that I'd say, I mean, I look to my S3 counterpart or the COO in this case and say, like how do we get after that? I am more concerned from an intelligence standpoint as to what it is that we can, what can we share? And so today, the Air Force has intelligence sharing agreements with a number of countries. All of the services do. At a national level, the intelligence community has intelligence sharing agreements as well with various countries. And so we have not yet, but we will. This is not a priority for me for this first year, but the follow-on it will be that I want to understand what our intelligence sharing agreements are. And then let's pick and choose which ones we want to robust. And when I talk about intelligence sharing, this is no kidding sharing, right? This is a two-way street. Yes. And so folks need to understand that this is not just a matter of the United States Space Force sharing intelligence with folks, but there are other capabilities that countries have that from an ISR standpoint that they might be able to collect something that we can't. And so we would love to be able to share that. So we're going to have to get after that, but it's a very, it's very important. And I know it's one of General Raymond's priorities here for year two is robusting those partnerships. So I look forward to it. Again, I'll just go back to the manpower at this, and prioritizing.
Yes.
Not quite up at the top yet, but we'll get there.
Okay. Loud and clear, on point. Well, we've come to the end of this segment of our discussion, and General Lauderback, thanks again for insightful comments, sharing your perspectives on this brave new Space Force venture you're on. And we wish you and your team the best and hope to talk to you again sometime soon.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It was great to talk to you.
Well, as an alert to our listeners, our next event is Monday, April 19th, when the Mitchell Institute will be unveiling a new report. It's called Toward a National Defense Strategy, Force Planning Construct that Reduces Risk of Strategic Failures. And we hope you can join us for that. And once again, that will be on April 20th. I misspoke. We're now going to open up our session to questions from the audience. General, you ready to go?
I am, yes.
Okay. They've been listening to our conversation. As a reminder to our listeners, you can participate using the Q&A in the Q&A by the raise hand function on the app, or you can type in your Q&A also. I'd ask you when I call on you, unmute your mic, state your name and affiliation, and then ask your question. With that, I have a question that's been, I'll read it here, or I'll paraphrase it here. General, in the last couple decades, weather support or weather information has become more of an intelligence feature than it is just simply weather. How do you see the replacement program for DMSP? I'm sure that's a program you're aware of, being on track, or can you talk to the importance of weather information in terms of your mission at Space Force?
Well,
EWS, for everybody, is the electro-optical infrared weather system, a distributed collection of satellites.
Okay, so thank you for the question. That is not a softball question for me as an intelligence professional, and so I'll be able to answer really basic from a weather perspective, right? And understanding, whether it's an ISR capability that we have on orbit, or if it's a capability that we're looking, that's doing cross orbit or looking up, or if it's something that's looking down. And obviously from my standpoint, I understand exactly what it is that weather can do. And the fact that we need to mitigate as much of the weather effects that we might have for planning purposes and then for execution of ISR. But I'm sorry, I just cannot answer to the where we are program wise. I just don't know. It's
yes,
yeah.
Yes, and I think both of us are, we've had the experience that tremendous efficiencies, especially on the ISR side, to have that weather information. I'm going to go to Teresa Hitchens from Breaking Defense. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, thank you for doing this, General. I'm
Of
Teresa
course.
Hitchens from Breaking Defense.
Mhm.
And my question also is about sensors. I believe you've said in the past that we simply don't have enough sensors to know what's going on in space. And I know that uh, the Space Force and before that Air Force Space Command was looking to increase our capability in the southern hemisphere, in particular by working with Australia. We're doing some hosted payloads with Japan. Do you have some sort of roadmap, or are you putting together some sort of roadmap to look at where the gaps are in space sensing capability and to fill those gaps with new sensors or hosted payloads, or even perhaps the use of commercial capabilities, because that's a really burgeoning area of activity right now. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Teresa, for the question. So I want to get there. That's exactly why I have this priority of building this capacity and capability to look at adversary systems. I think that and to be able to characterize those adversary systems. So we're not there yet, but I had mentioned the SWAC, which is the Space Warfighting Analysis Center, and that's really where I think we will be able to get after the force design of what do we want an ISR enterprise to look like from a capability perspective, whether that's on orbit or not. And absolutely, it needs to include anything that is, flown today by NRO as an example, but also the what is commercially flown. Also, what is terrestrially owned, if that's commercial, or if that's just industry is coming up with some great ideas to be able to get after the persistence that we need, as well as the fidelity of sensors. And so I can't. It's not a good answer. I can't say that we have made a lot of strides in this, but if you could ask me that again in 6 months or a year from now, I think that we'll be in a much better place to understand everything that is out there, and then what are those gaps, what are those requirements, and then let's go towards building that game plan to get to building those capabilities, if that's in case what we decide to do.
Do you actually have like a time deadline or a goal for being able to develop such a roadmap?
No, I can't. I don't. And I will say that because again, we are just developing, creating that the analysis center that I think we will work hand in hand with from the intelligence directorate, right? But it will be. I could say, if it's a couple of years from now, that would be a goal of mine, is to define that game plan.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I've got a written-in question here, General, asking about who's going to be responsible, or will you be responsible for tactical ISR support to ground, naval, and air units, that is targeting information, maritime surveillance, and so forth.
Yes, so this is an area that we are discussing at this point. I will tell you that we are not going to be the Air Force, and we are not going to build a DCGS, distributed common ground system, right? So we've got in the Air Force, we've got probably 7,000 airmen that are dedicated to information that is coming off of theater airborne ISR, as well as other capabilities, other sensors. And so they're putting that information together, exploiting that, and putting that analysis together to present to various combatant commands and operation centers, et cetera. That is not going to be the Space Force. We do not have the manpower for that. And instead, what I would say is that if there is ISR, if there's I don't really like to use the term tactical ISR coming off of capability on orbit. Because ISR can be tactical, it can be operational, it can be strategic. It all comes off of the same bird, right? But nonetheless, that capability that's providing ISR, looking down, we are going to have to define this way of data comes off of those capabilities and goes direct to the customer, and they do their own exploitation. They do their own analysis on it. We are not going to right now. I have not been told that I need to do that, and I'm definitely not resourced to do that. So not in the cards yet. The other thing is the other capabilities. We are building an exploitation squadron for ourselves And that will be for exploitation that we have from or on orbit sensors that are doing cross orbit or looking up types of things. That's what we expect our exploitation squadron to be doing, but we will be the primary customer of that.
We got time for one last question here. I'll read it. There's significant challenges to share information, which we discussed a bit between Title 10 and Title 50 organizations, and many things in space are compartmentalized. What's being done to address these challenges?
Yes, well, this is not new. And General Hyten, a number of years ago, I think he was probably the first one that said we have got to get over this compartmentalization. Now that's really on the ops side when General Hyten or when General Raymond speaks to that. On the intelligence side, absolutely, as this person has mentioned, that it's difficult between Title 10 and 50 organizations because there is compartmentalization on the intelligence side. But I think that we are doing better, and this is where there's us being a member of the intelligence community and having a voice at the table. And the first time I met with the DNI as an example, I talked about trying to how are we able to message more and share intelligence that the American public needs to know as to what is happening, unprofessional behavior by the Russians on orbit as an example. So I think this is a big win for us to be being part of the intelligence community, and me being something that I want to hammer on a regular basis to be able to share that information. And again, it goes to, just like everything is based on relationships. I think it's this great relationship that we are developing between the Title 10 already and Title 50, whether it be within the USDI staff, the DNI staff, or in the combat support agencies. And everywhere I go, all of these senior leaders, we're all in agreement. We know the importance of space, of the domain to our way of life and to our way of war. And so I think we're going to take on these challenges and get to success in the future. So just need a little bit of time to get there.
Great quote, General. Well, we've come to the end of our Spacepower Forum. A big thanks to you and your team again, General Lauderback. And I'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Sounds great.
So you bet. So to you and our audience, from all of us here at Mitchell Institute, have a great aerospace day.